All right, everyone. We start off today with a accidentally poignant post by Brian Krasenstein. That's Larry Hogan not getting into the 24 race. He accidentally makes a very, very good point here. I had to help him do that. So link in the description. I'm not going to bother archiving it because they have a tendency not to delete their tweets. So there's one positive thing about it. You'll remember the Krasensteins as the brothers who got banned off of Twitter for several years for botting. Well, they're back, but there's no Trump post to shitpost under. So now they get like a fifth of the engagement just posting about random political stuff and occasionally being reply guys. It's rather funny anyway. His original post. Breaking, Larry Hogan will not challenge Trump in 2024. Now, freeze frame. This is the sound of DeSantis fans actually cheering. This actually helps. The fewer people that get in, the more DeSantis is likely to get in. That's number one. Because he would have been somewhere between, I think, Nikki Haley and Mike Pence levels of support, so upper single digits. The problem for like DeSantis is the more people that get in, the more the non-Trump vote is split, because anyone that gets in, they drain a few voters from Trump, his soft core of support. They drain 10 times more from the rest of the pool. So if you end up with 4 or more people in there with any viability at all, Trump's going to run the field. In other words, just like other self-proclaimed moderate Republicans, and of course, that's a self-profession according to the liberals. If you've gone far left, like extreme woke turd, you probably consider Larry Hogan and Jeb Bush and people like that, like the neocon crowd, to still be Satan. But at least they're not evil super Satan steroid Hitler or something like that. That's basically how they compare to Orange Man. He is too much of a coward to really attempt to give the GOP a chance to disengage from the hate, bigotry, and nationalism that Trump represents. People like Hogan are dangerous because after they attack the actions that repulse them, they normalize those actions by stepping away completely. Well, it's called pragmatism. If you know that you can't win and you don't have a book to sell like John Bolton or a single issue idea to sell like Ramaswamy, you probably stay out of the race. Why do you think Marianne Williamson, Crystal Grandma, has decided to jump in against an incumbent Joe Biden who may or may not run? She just wants to be in the field early. And I responded, cry more about MAGA supremacy, lol. Because, I mean, the liberals right now are trying to claim that it's some sort of loss for Trump or for MAGA, that the neocons didn't show up largely at CPAC. Other than Pompeo and a few others, they decided to get a few jabs in. Mostly it was Trump country. Well, that's because of his in-party support. It's just very, very high. So, you know, the writing's sort of on the wall. And then he replied, Americans don't want MAGA. They want normalcy. And I said, yeah, these are synonyms. MAGA is normal. What's abnormal is the far left trajectory of the Democratic Party currently today. Being extremely soft on crime, despite the fact that the two ostensive executive leaders of the party, Biden and Kamala, were extreme tough on crimers back in the 90s and 2000s. They've done a total 180 on that. I would say that abnormal is a major disaster happening right in the heartland, affecting potentially tens or hundreds of thousands of people, and the transport secretary only going there because Trump undercut him. I would say that it's abnormal that a pre-agreed upon withdrawal from Afghanistan is unilaterally punted ahead several months just for egotistical purposes, resulting in the entire catastrophic losses that we faced over in Afghanistan in the wake of the Taliban joining up with other forces that wouldn't have joined up with them at all had we stuck with the Trump agreement to withdraw in the proper timetable, is all hammered out. It wasn't just the Taliban and the Afghan government that you have to appease there in a country where something like half the territory is held by tribal warlords. They have a disproportionate amount of power, and they're capable of helping you, or they're capable of helping the Taliban. Well, you decided to piss them off by breaching the etiquette of the way deals are made in that part of the world. I would say it's abnormal to have a president of the United States who openly is hostile towards multiple constitutional amendments, and not just the Second Amendment. There's been a breach of the First Amendment under the Biden regime. Look at the Twitter files and much more if you don't believe me. You've got the weaponization of the DOJ. That's abnormal. You've got the weaponization of the IRS. That's abnormal. Notice that the first thing that the IRS proposed as a new rule wasn't, hey, we've decided to triple the audits of people making $500,000 a year or more, which is what, people like Krasenstein would want. It was to go after tipping. Well, that's abnormal. I would say that's unhelpful. Leaving the U.S. border entirely undefended, I would say that's abnormal. I would say that engaging in a proxy war involving a nation that is currently fighting a rival nuclear power is abnormal. These things are not normal. MAGA is not hateful. MAGA is normal. Nothing that Trump has proposed over the last half decade would be conceivably different from the average mainstream, accepted, not hateful, not extreme, anything like that, platform of a Democrat back in the 1980s with regards to basically anything. Trump gets on stage at CPAC. There are a handful of goofball Republicans who openly muse about cutting Medicaid or Social Security. Sometimes the quotes are out of context, but there are actually a few of them that believe that's a good idea. Trump laid waste to them. He said, no, I'm not going to go after them at all. We need to defend them. And you know how they coped with this? Well, Trump is basically endorsing Joe Biden. Yes, he's not endorsing himself as a candidate and trying to set himself aside from the handful of goofballs that have jumped in like Nikki Haley, who probably would try to cut those platforms because they're brain dead, which is why they won't be nominee. Securing the border is not abnormal. Upholding the Second Amendment, and even in a half-assed sort of NRA FUD way, the best you're going to get is something that's a little bit better than like the NRA status quo under Trump when it comes to firearms. You won't get any new gun control other than they half-heartedly went after bump stocks. Didn't work too well. Slash red flag, which, by the way, DeSantis fans, he endorsed down in Florida, just to be clear. On the state level, you can actually do things like that. Not so much on the federal level. Now, there's nothing abnormal about Trump. Wanting to expand the child tax credit, calling it a baby bonus. Well, I noticed that they didn't criticize the policy. They simply criticized him saying, well, men, you're going to be so happy. Oh, it's going to be so great for men. Well, it will be, also for women. He chose to leave that out probably so you'd carry the soundbite. But you're too fucking stupid to realize that. He's been conning you that way now for 6 years. Trump is not the abnormal one. The left are the abnormal ones. And which party is whining and dining them? Which party is saying that it's acceptable for kids to be exposed to explicit sexualized minstrel shows? The Democrats. They're the ones sheltering those individuals. Which party is pretending that we need to have a national conversation about whether to teach our children communism vis-a-vis CRT in taxpayer-funded schools? I can't find any Republican who's even saying that we need to debate the issue and consider it further. I see the half-assed Democrats saying that, and then I see the left saying, well, CRT isn't being taught in the schools, but if it would be taught, it would be a virtue. Your party is the one doing that, and even people on the fringe of the party that are Johnny-come-latelys that would normally vote green, but the Dems have conned them into believing that they're going to get student loan debt forgiveness. Speaking of that, that's not normal either. It's normal to say, look, the emergency's over, go back to the way we were doing it before. We've subsidized it long enough, and we're going to create a massive problem if we allow the executive branch to override legislative authority. Though that's abnormal. It's abnormal to see a situation in which you've got a bunch of foaming leftoids saying that we need to censor, First Amendment be damned, think of the children, while warmongering at the same time. You people sound like George W. at a drag show. You sound like George W. Bush if George W. Bush had swapped out Jesus for Moloch. That's what the current Democratic atmosphere feels like to me. I say this as a millennial. I remember the liberal anti-war, Occupy sort of era. That spirit is entirely goddamn gone. For some reason, some of these people have been so conned, they've pulled an entire 180 on their entire worldview, and they still consider themselves to be part of the same ideology. Yeah, I guess the parties have finally done the mythological flip that everyone's been talking about before. The Republicans have completely embraced populism, minus a few rhino-cons like Kevin McCarthy or that sourpuss Paul Ryan, maybe Mitt Romney. To an extent, people like Cornyn, too, selling out as well. They've embraced populism, actually attempting to promote conservatism, and not just, hey, we don't want more leftoid policies, but we want to use a hard restore point and go back to when things were working in the 80s or 90s. That's not abnormal. Most people alive today have already lived through that. We made it through, didn't we? We weren't fighting the kind of wars we're fighting now, were we? We weren't suffering the inflation that we're suffering now, were we? Most of the problems that we currently have were absent at the time. About the only problem is you didn't have good internet access and the music on the radio. If you were in the hinterlands, you got classic rock or you got Sheryl Crow. Basically, that was the problem that everything boiled down to in life for me as a kid. Gas prices, 99 fucking cents and shit like that. Yes, things were so terrible back then when we had those evil and deranged nationalistic policies, because that's literally what Trump is proposing. The policies are no different. They're the same as what already worked, far better than what we're doing currently. That's why I support Trump. It's not because MAGA extremism, oh, I hate the gays, I hate brown people, oh my god, we're being overrun. It's not because of that, it's because his policies are the sane ones. That's about all. Peace out.